Today, Kim's going to do some cross-hatching on her Strawberry Thief quilt. Welcome to Handi Quilter's Watch and Learn. I'm Kristina Whitney.
And I'm Kim Sandberg.
And we've got a fun episode today.
Yeah, we do.
Kim's going to be putting some cross-hatching in the center of her quilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, in a previous episode, you showed how to load on point specifically for this quilt.
Right.
Because of the type of cross-hatching that you want to do.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about what is cross-hatching.
Yes, let's talk about that. So I have a great example right here of cross-hatching that we can take a closer look at. So this is cross-hatching on the diagonal, and it's just lines that cross each other at 90-degree angles on this one. But there's lots of different ways. So it's just basically putting a grid on the fabric, and there's lots and lots of different ways that you can do it. So I want to look at actually some stencils that you have first that show all of the different ways, not all of, an idea of some of the different ways that you can do it.
A variety of different grids.
So using a stencil is a great way to help you get a grid on there. So you could use something like this and then create your own, lay it down one way, pounce it, turn it the other way, use the pounce, and then create your own grid. There's also really great stencils like this that create one, and this one's a 60-degree one, so it's a diamond, which is really fun.
It's a fun one to use.
It's a fun one to use.
Variety.
Yeah. Here's one that's really cool. It's actually kind of wiggly, so you don't necessarily have to do perfectly straight lines, which I kind of like the idea of. I'm questioning myself now, going, oh, I'm going to do straight lines. Well, yeah. Here is just straight on the 90-degree again.
So a lot of times that's called on point.
Yep. And depending on where you lay it and the direction you lay it on your fabric can depend on the way that you do it. This one's pretty cool. This is actually like clamshells.
Yeah, it's just another wavy line, just back and forth.
Exactly. And then we've got a really small grid here. So really, whatever you can come up with, you can do as cross-hatching.
Yep.
You can do all different kinds of things. I really love to do cross-hatching behind applique. So there's two different kind of schools of thought for this. You can do it like we did in this little sample that I have here, where the cross-hatching comes to the edge of the applique, it stops, and then it picks up again on the other side of it down here and continues across. So it is not across the top of the applique. You can also do like in this fun quilt here, where it's just cross-hatched all the way across the whole thing. And it's not right or wrong, it's just...
Yeah, so if you look at the back of that one, the entire middle section is completely cross-hatched.
Yep. And that's, it's cute. This is printed on here and then hand embroidered, and it's perfectly fine to stitch over the top of that. That's just fine.
Yep.
So the thing is, you just pick one way and you stay consistent throughout the quilt. That's what you need to do. So on my quilt, I have this big piece of applique in this big square in the center. And just a note here, if any of you have looked up this pattern and you're like, wait, that's a little bit different. In the original pattern, there's a big circle in the center. I didn't want to deal with the circle, so I just left mine as a big square here in the center. And I want to do cross-hatching on the diagonal, which is why I took the time to load the quilts this way, as Kristina mentioned. And I want to have it come up so it comes to the edge of my applique, and then we're going to jump over it and continue my way across. The easiest way to keep things really straight and square when you're doing something like this, for me, is to have the quilt loaded so that you can do an entire line all the way across in the throat space.
So even though you're going to be stitching lines horizontally, when you take the quilt off and it's no longer loaded on point, it will be on a diagonal.
Exactly. It'll be on that 45-degree angle, right?
Yes. So I'm excited to see what tools you're going to use. Are you going to use stencils?
No, I'm not going to use a stencil, but that is one way you can do this. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, because I want to really stress, I am going to be doing this with a pro stitcher, but I want to absolutely stress there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can just use a good old basic channel lock. Absolutely, you can do that. If you're going to use the channel lock, I would recommend taking the time to mark everything beforehand. So Kristina's got a water-soluble marker here. This is a great way to do it. If I was marking everything out beforehand, I would have taken the time to lay this out on a big table, and I would have marked everything completely before I loaded it. So I made sure everything was straight. So that's one option.
Okay.
You could also use electromagnetic channel locks if you happen to be one of the lucky people who has those on their machine. You can also use any straight edge ruler. So using a ruler is great too. And once again, if you're doing with the electromagnetic or any of these other ones, I would recommend doing some marking, unless you happen to be lucky enough to have a quilt that the piecing is spaced so that you have points within the quilting, like marking points to let you know. And it doesn't mean that you have to completely draw out the lines. You just need to draw where each line starts so that you can stay straight all the way across.
I like to do dot to dot.
Yes, that's a great way of doing it.
So like for instance, if I were here, I'd say, okay, I've got this mark here and I need to go to this mark here. So use that to line the ruler up.
And that's perfect. And if I was gonna do that, I would have chosen a larger ruler, but that would work for, say, like right there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. You can do from point to point.
Yeah, my favorite straight edge ruler for this is the straight edge ruler.
Imagine that, because it is longer, isn't it?
It is the longer length.
Yep.
So even if I'm not stitching that full length, it helps me to be able to line up to a bigger space.
To keep things straight all the way across.
You don't have to mark as frequently.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the tricks. So, look at your quilt top for cues, and you'll be able to figure out ways to help you do it. Well, I'm going to use the Pro Stitcher, and the Pro Stitcher has a function in it called measure. And so I'm going to use measure to make sure, sorry, as I move the machine in front of Kristina. I'm going to be using measure to keep my lines an inch apart. I want to do a 1 inch grid all the way across this.
Okay.
So we're going to come up here to the top, and I'm going to turn off my base stitch first.
That's always a good thing to do.
It's very, very important. And I have the option here. I absolutely could have done the stitch in the ditch first. I chose not to, which is fine. But I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And let me, I also want to say that I could use mark to do this with Pro Stitcher also. There's lots of different ways to do this in Pro Stitcher. I'm going to just do this with my channel locks and using measure, because I've got a lot of jumping to do, at least for the initial, the initial part, to show everybody how to do this here. So I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to start up here at my very top point. So I am lining up, and you know what? I know that the laser does a little bit of a weird thing, but I just want to show everybody. So I am lining up that laser point directly with that very top point there. And then I am going to turn on measure, and on the screen, I'm just going to follow it down so that I am going to 1 inch.
And that's on your Pro Stitcher.
And it's on my Pro Stitcher. So you can see I've got that little 1 inch right there. We can see that it says exactly 1 inch. Yes, very nice.
And close.
And then I'm going to turn on my horizontal channel lock. Once I've done that, my machine can only move from side to side. And then I will come over here and bring my thread up, do a little, and just stitch across, come to the edge there. And I can do a tie off if I want to. I actually have a high cruise on, and so it's basically doing a tie off for me. And then I will go ahead and clip my thread. And then I will just continue to work my way through the quilt, doing exactly that same thing again and again and again. So I'm going to turn the horizontal channel lock off, move the machine down to 2 inches. And the more you do this as you work your way through the quilt, it's amazing how you get to a point where you can pretty much just almost eyeball it and you'll be right on. Okay, there's 2 inches. Turn on my horizontal once again, bring up my thread, and then go ahead and stitch across. Now, I haven't pulled out these stitches here in the center, my basting stitches. I could have pulled those out or not, depending on what you want to do. You can pull them out after or before. I'm leaving them in right now, honestly, just because I'm lazy.
I'd leave them in just for that extra stability.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna go ahead and move down to 3 inches. And I'm just gonna keep working my way through the quilt here. So I've reached a point now where the next set of lines that I'm going to do is I move down to my next inch mark. Go ahead and move down and I'll set my horizontal channel line. You can see that I am butting up against my applique here. So let me just show you what I'm going to do. So it's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, but it's always good to see it, right?
Yep. So you opted not to stitch over top of your applique.
I am not going to stitch over the top of the applique. So I'm going to come to the edge of the applique. I'm going to stop. And then because this is a short jump, I'm not going to clip my threads. I'm just going to loosen it up a little bit and then go ahead and start and stitch across.
Okay, were you doing tie-offs at the beginning and the end there?
So I have my machine set on a high cruise. I'm at like 375. And so if I just pause there for a second, it's like it's doing a tie-off.
Okay, so you're just pausing, letting the machine do some stitches in place and calling it good.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we're gonna go down to my 9 inches.
That's always a fun question we get asked.
Yes. It is.
Anytime you're going to break your thread, you want to do a tie-off.
Now, you guys can also see here, this is actually a really good one. So you can see that I'm going to be stitching right next to this basting stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and take a minute to take this basting stitch out because I don't want to run the risk of stitching right over the top of an entire line of stitching.
And then trying to pull it out.
And then trying to pull it out and having it potentially take out some of my stitching that I've done. So I'm just gonna take this out really quickly. And don't forget, anytime you take out basting stitches, there's stitching on both sides. So be sure to
grab that bobbin.
Grab that bobbin thread too. So I'm gonna pull the bobbin up right there and clip it, and then I can reach underneath and grab it and pull it.
And you're only taking out in that center section that you're stitching in. The rest of that line you're leaving in.
Yes, I want to leave that in because I am going to be definitely manipulating this quilt a bit. I want to make sure that it stays nice and stabilized. Okay, let's go ahead and I'll do my needle down, needle up. As you can see here, I'm just pausing a little bit at the beginning and letting it take some of those cruise stitches. Pausing at the end, letting it take some of those cruise stitches, which is just working as my tie-off.
Yeah. And if you prefer more of a tack, you could just move the machine just a little bit, just give it a little wiggle.
Yep, exactly. And we'll go ahead and jump over. And you can see that this is a pass that I'm actually doing a fair amount of jumping in between. This is a big part of the reason why I chose to do the cross-hatching this way. I am really making sure that I'm keeping those lines straight all the way across, even though I am starting and stopping often.
So that's one of the benefits of using those channel locks.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and turn that off. And you can see there, and then remember when you get done to go back and clip your threads here if you leave those long tails.
Top and bottom.
Top and bottom.
Can you just walk us through verbally how you turned the quilt so that you could go the other direction?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the video we did on loading this, I basted this quilt to the leaders. So I just had to clip through, just rip out those stitches really quick. Then I took the quilt and I just turned it 90 degrees and then attached it to the leaders at the top and at the bottom, and then went ahead and did the same thing where I started at the top and just worked my way through 1-inch increments to create that cross hatching all the way through the center. And I just want to stress that I left the corner pieces that I had basted onto the backing on. The basting I was talking about taking out on the edge is where I basted the backing to the leader. I took those stitches out. I did not take the corner edge ones.
So this fun part here that was added, that stays on. You take the whole quilt, turn it 90 degrees, and pin the other side.
Exactly,
Gotcha.
Exactly. And worked my way through it again.
And you've done some videos showing how
Yes.
you turn a quilt.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
there's
we have.
information out there if you've got questions, or ask us in the comments and we'll walk you through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I am so excited about this quilt.
Yeah, me too.
I love the cross hatching, the look that you're getting, and I love that it's on the diagonal.
Me too.
So a lot of extra work loading it on point, but
Yes.
definitely worth it.
Definitely, definitely. I figure I spend enough time doing all the hand applique on this. It's worth it to spend a little bit of extra time on quilting to get the look I really want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to challenge you guys to do some cross hatching. Use all of those different tools that we shared with you earlier. Try different designs, do a double cross hatch, triple, add some fills, be wild and crazy. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and have fun quilting.
One of the best things we get to do is create fabulous content for you. For 5 years now, we've been putting out one video a week in our Watch and Learn show, and we're going to be making a change to this cadence.
So instead of doing it every single week, we are now going to be having our Watch and Learn show on the first and third Tuesday of each month.
The time isn't changing. They're still going to premiere on YouTube and Facebook at noon Mountain Time on the first and third Tuesdays. We're doing this so that we'll have opportunities to bring you more great educational content on even more social media platforms. So please join us. We look forward to having you enjoy one of our videos and have fun quilting.